Welcome to TRN, everyone. Today we're looking into the latest legal developments surrounding Karl-Heinz Grasser, Austria's former finance minister. Specifically, his conviction and what's happening with his financial situation now.
Yes, it's certainly a major update in a case that's been very public for a very long time. The Supreme Court's written judgment from March is now out, and that definitely sets things in motion.
Absolutely. So let's start with the core verdict and the penalties. The Supreme Court, the OGH, they found Grasser guilty of bribery, didn't they?
That's right. Connected to the privatization of federal housing, the BUWOG deal, and also the Terminal Tower project in Linz.
And the sums involved were huge, almost 10 million euros in bribes altogether.
Yeah, nearly 10 million. And that led to prison sentences. 4 years for Grasser himself.
Okay.
3.5 years for his best man, Walter Meischberger, and 3 years for the ex-lobbyist, Peter Hochegger. But it's not just about jail time, is it?
No, not at all. On top of the prison sentences, Grasser, Meischberger, and 2 others were ordered to repay the illegal commissions, basically the bribe money, as damages to the Republic of Austria.
And that amount, the original 9.8 million euros, well, with interest piling up since 2017, it's now around 13 million euros.
13 million. That's a staggering amount of money.
It really is. And, well, this brings us straight to Grasser's financial situation. It appears he's, well, unable to pay these damages.
That seems to be the crux of it now. At the end of April, Grasser filed for private insolvency, personal bankruptcy, at the district court in Kitzbühel.
Confirmed by the KSV 1870 Credit Protection Agency.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Walter Meischberger also declared bankruptcy last year, 2023, and Peter Hochegger did back in 2020 already.
It does add another layer of complexity, though we should remember the Republic of Austria did manage to secure some assets back in 2016 when the indictment happened.
Oh, right. The funds in Liechtenstein.
Exactly. Just over 2 million euros were secured there. So that covers a small part of the claim, at least.
Okay, better than nothing, but still leaves a huge shortfall. So what are the specific legal implications now that he's filed for insolvency?
Well, first, the court has to review if the requirements for opening insolvency proceedings are actually met.
Standard procedure. Okay.
Right. But given how complex this whole thing is, the Creditor Association, AKV, expects things to move fairly quickly, appointing an insolvency administrator and so on.
Makes sense.
But here's a really crucial point. There's a special regulation in Austrian insolvency law concerning debts that arise from intentionally committed unlawful acts, like bribery, for instance.
Ah, okay. That sounds important. What does that mean in practical terms for Grasser?
It means that this particular type of debt, the damages owed to the Republic, doesn't just get wiped out through the standard insolvency process. Even if his income is attached down to the minimum subsistence level for 3 or 5 years in what's called a debt settlement procedure, this specific debt remains.
So no automatic clean slate for this debt at the end of the process.
Exactly. The only way for him to actually get rid of this debt to the Republic would be to reach a specific agreement, like a payment plan, directly with the Financial Public Prosecutor's Office, the Finance Procurator.
Right. That's a very significant detail. So what reason did Grasser, or rather his lawyer, give for filing for insolvency now?
His lawyer, Manfred Eindauter, stated that Grasser hasn't had any income for a long time because of how incredibly long these legal proceedings dragged on. And at the same time, he incurred very high costs fighting the case. So according to the lawyer, this led to the insolvency filing.
The length of the proceedings is definitely a recurring theme here. This whole BUWOG affair, it's considered the biggest corruption trial of Austria's Second Republic, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It spanned more than 15 years from start to, well, this point.
15 years.
Yeah.
Incredible. And the core issue was the sale of those 60,000 federal apartments back in 2004 to IMO Finance.
Yes. And a key detail was how close the bids were. The winner, IMO Finance, bid only 1 million euros more than the runner-up, CA IMO. A tiny margin that triggered this whole massive investigation into potential insider dealing and bribery.
Right, that narrow margin was the hook. And speaking of the long duration, that actually played a role in the final sentencing by the Supreme Court, didn't it?
It did, significantly. The OGH explicitly reduced the original prison sentences handed down by the lower court.
Yeah, I remember reading that. Grasser's sentence was halved, from 8 years down to 4.
Correct. Meischberger's went from 7 years down to 3.5. and Hochegger's from 6 down to 3, with 2 of those suspended.
And the court's reasoning was specifically the exorbitant and inappropriate duration of the proceedings.
Precisely. They cited the excessive length as a mitigating factor. It's quite unusual for a Supreme Court to reduce sentences so substantially for that reason, actually.
It does seem quite rare. Shows just how drawn out this process was for everyone involved.
Definitely. And after the verdict was announced, there was even some confusion about the timing of the written judgment being issued, wasn't there? The OGH had to clarify things.
Yes, that's right. They put out a statement to clear up what they called misunderstandings and incorrect media reports.
Apparently, the 4-week deadline being discussed in the media referred to the internal finalization and signing of the judgment document itself.
Not the delivery to the parties involved.
Exactly. They stressed that the written judgment was passed on to the relevant internal department on April 4th, went through checks, anonymization, all that. Basically, they were saying there was no missed deadline on their part.
Okay, so just procedural clarification. Good to know. And what does this all mean for when the prison sentences actually start?
Well, the OGH also clarified that the 1-month deadline for starting the sentence doesn't begin from the verdict announcement, but from when the actual summons to begin serving the sentence is delivered by the Vienna Regional Criminal Court.
Right, so the clock starts ticking upon receiving that official notice.
Correct, although Grasser and Meischberger have both stated they believe it's a miscarriage of justice and plan to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg.
Okay, so that's another potential legal avenue.
It is, but it's important to understand that the ECHR typically can't prevent or delay the start of a prison sentence imposed by a national court.
So they'd likely have to start serving their time regardless.
Most likely, yes. The ECHR could, down the line, find that there was a violation of the European Convention on Human Rights, perhaps relating to the trial length or fairness, and might demand remedial measures from Austria. But that process usually takes several years.
Okay, so no immediate impact on starting the sentence. Let's try and wrap this up then. The key takeaways seem to be Karl-Heinz Grasser's conviction for bribery is final. He faces significant prison time and owes around 13 million euros in damages,
which he apparently can't pay, leading to his personal insolvency filing. But, crucially, that specific debt likely won't be discharged easily because it stems from an intentional, unlawful act.
And his prison sentence is set to begin soon, despite plans for an ECHR appeal.
And we absolutely have to remember the extraordinary length of this BUWOG case over 15 years, which was so extreme that even the Supreme Court felt compelled to reduce the sentences because of it.
It's really quite a saga. So, thinking about all this, the legal complexities, the huge sums, the sheer time involved, what does this case tell us, maybe, about the challenges of prosecuting high-level corruption and actually ensuring accountability? And perhaps what broader impact could these kinds of incredibly lengthy legal battles have on society's trust in the justice system?
Those are definitely the big questions hanging over this whole affair, aren't they? It makes you think about efficiency, deterrence, and ultimately what justice looks like after such a long and winding road.